Good evening, you're watching BBC Newsline. Tonight, the aftermath of a general election full of drama. An election which has for the first time returned more nationalist MPs than unionists. We report on all the big battles and analyse what it all means for the parties, for Brexit and for the union. The DUP lost 2 Belfast seats and failed to win the long hoped-for seat in North Down. Sinn Féin took North Belfast. Celebrations too for the SDLP with resounding successes in Foyle and South Belfast.
We worked very, very hard to get the vote out, and I think that's been very clear over this past 5 to 6 weeks. But the demography was against it, and of course the SDLP decided not to run, and I think that has shown that the Pan-Nationalist Front has come to fruition again.
We wanted people to vote for something and not against something, and we listened to what people in South Belfast were concerned about, and that's what we spent the last several months, indeed several years, talking about.
In Westminster, Boris Johnson now has a commanding majority. He's no longer reliant on the DUP and will deliver Brexit within weeks. That will have major implications for Northern Ireland.
The political map has been redrawn. The 18 Westminster seats here are now in the hands of 4 different parties.
It was a very good night for the Alliance Party, who saw their election surge continue with a win in North Down. But with the fall in the DUP vote and the Ulster Unionists winning nothing, what future has unionism created?
Brexit is unionism's biggest ever own goal. And the outcome may be the end of the United Kingdom.
Every election has its winners and losers, and the general election of 2019 was no different, with a few shocks as well. The DUP suffered a bruising night of results, losing 2 of its MPs. The party's Westminster leader Nigel Dodds lost his North Belfast seat to Sinn Féin's John Finucane, and Emma Little-Pengelly was defeated by Claire Hanna of the SDLP in South Belfast. Sinn Féin's Alicia McCallion also suffered a big loss in Foyle, which was taken by the SDLP leader Colm Eastwood with a big majority. The Alliance Party's Stephen Farry will now be representing North Down in the Commons after beating the DUP. So where does that leave the parties overall? Well, for the first time ever, there are more nationalist MPs representing Northern Ireland elected to the Commons than unionist MPs. The DUP are down 2 seats, which leaves them with 8 MPs. Sinn Féin took 7 seats after losing Foyle. The SDLP have 2 MPs. Alliance has 1, with the Ulster Unionist Party failing to get any candidate elected. During the course of this specially extended programme, we will show you the results in all 18 constituencies. First, we look at 4 where there were some big changes. In North Belfast, Sinn Féin's John Finucane polled over 23,000 votes to beat the DUP deputy leader Nigel Dodds. The Belfast Lord Mayor now has a majority of almost 2,000. Sinn Féin took just over 47% of the vote to the DUP's 43.1%. John Finucane's victory came with a 5.4% increase in the Sinn Féin vote. In North Down, the Alliance Party deputy leader Stephen Farry won with over 18,000 votes, pushing the DUP into second place. He has a majority of just under 3,000. The Alliance Party won 45.2% of the vote and saw an increase in their vote of over 35%. In Foyle, the SDLP leader Colm Eastwood regained the constituency for his party by beating Sinn Féin. He polled over 26,000 votes and now has a majority of 17,000. The SDLP won 57% of the vote to Sinn Féin's 20.7%. The SDLP is up over 17%, Sinn Féin down 19% on the last election. The SDLP has also had a big victory in South Belfast, with Claire Hanna beating the DUP. She won over 27,000 votes and now has a majority of over 15,000. The SDLP won over 57% of the vote and saw their share increase by 31%. The DUP's fell by over 5%. Our political correspondent Gareth Gordon has been taking a closer look at those results, which were revealed overnight, and a new look political picture for Northern Ireland in the House of Commons.
A bad night for the DUP, a mixed night for Sinn Féin, and a very good night for Alliance and the SDLP. Those are the headlines, but this was far too complex an election to dismiss in simple terms. Let's begin at the beginning.
But it is a dramatic poll.
The exit poll at 10 o'clock, forecasting a Conservative majority, answered the first big question. Boris Johnson would need no help to govern. The days of DUP influence at Westminster were gone, but worse was to come. The loss of Nigel Dodds in North Belfast.
I want to thank each and every person who came out to vote for me today in North Belfast. And I also want to acknowledge here tonight that there were those who stretched themselves, and I know that this election was an election that transcended party politics, and I know that I was very much the beneficiary of that today.
The new MP, I want to say I congratulate him on his victory. I do regret the fact that North Belfast, however, will be left unrepresented in the House of Commons at a very challenging time.
So why did it happen?
Well, I think it's very clear the demography just wasn't there. We worked very, very hard to get the vote out, and I think that's been very clear over this past 5 to 6 weeks. But the demography was against it, and of course the SDLP decided not to run, and I think that has shown that the Pan-Nationalist Front has come to fruition again in North Belfast.
But for Sinn Féin, this would be a night of two halves, one high, the other low. The SDLP leader did not just reclaim foil, he did it by more than 17,000 votes, bigger even than the margin of victory ever achieved by John Hume.
We heard you loud and clear. We know you want someone to go to Westminster to fight your case, to stand up to Boris Johnson, to protect us from Brexit, but you also want us to get back to work in Stormont. No more excuses will be accepted by the people of our city or the people of Northern Ireland. Let's get back to work.
For Sinn Féin, a devastating result.
But a wise man once said, a man who's very, very close to my own heart, that Republicans never retire. So again, my pledge to the people of Derry is that this isn't the last of Alicia McCallan.
1,070.
The SDLP's rebirth did not end there. Claire Hanna won South Belfast, destroying the DUP's Emma Little-Pengelly by more than 15,000 votes, although she was helped by parties standing aside, including Sinn Féin.
Any vote is always only lent. You have to earn it each time. I believe that we've done that. We wanted people to vote for something and not against something, and we listened to what people in South Belfast were concerned about, and that's what we spent the last several months, indeed several years, talking about.
Alliance won North Down. The DUP has never held the seat, but were expected to this time. It felt like a loss.
I want to also acknowledge that many people from right across the political spectrum have placed their faith in me. They have come together behind a single cause of sending out a very clear and powerful message that the North Down area wants to remain.
Alliance is now the third biggest party. Its leader Naomi Long reduced Gavin Robinson's majority in East Belfast, but his lead was too big to overturn. The DUP must now watch as Boris Johnson proceeds with a version of Brexit it hates. Does it trust him? No, but it's too late for that.
I suppose the best way to describe Boris Johnson is, and it's for the record, he would take your Alsatian dog for a walk, he'd come back an hour later and he'd give you a chihuahua and he'd say it was all right.
As for the Ulster Unionists, just before 7 they lost their last chance of a seat. Former leader Tom Elliott bowed to Sinn Féin's Michelle Gildernew by just 57 votes in the always close Fermanagh South Tyrone. For the new leader, a difficult baptism.
We'll need to look at the detail, we'll need to analyse the facts, and we'll need to see what's out there. But for us, for the Ulster Unionist Party, we need to look very closely at what we've done. But what is very clear is that we need a broad spectrum of unionism. And the Ulster Unionist Party's position, we need to have a strong Ulster Unionist Party out there.
The winners will now go to Westminster to watch a no longer hung Parliament presumably get Brexit done. Others will go to Stormont next week to try to get devolution done too. Right now, the former is a lot more certain than the latter. Gareth Gordon, BBC Newsline, Belfast.
Well, the election took place only 2.5 years after the last Westminster poll. The outcome was very different. BBC Newsline's Mark Simpson reports.
It's all about the numbers, so let's look at the ones that really matter. The Conservative Party needed 326 seats for an overall majority, and they got them with plenty to spare. No need for the DUP to support them in the next Parliament. It was a bad night, as you can see, for Labour and for the Lib Dems. In Scotland, the SNP won 48 seats. That's 13 more than last time. The DUP went down from 10 to 8 seats, with Nigel Dodds, of course, who was their Westminster leader, there he is, losing out in North Belfast after almost 20 years as an MP. So what about the rest of Northern Ireland? Here is the new political map. Still plenty of DUP red and Sinn Féin green, though in many of those seats their majorities have been reduced. Significantly, there is still that east-west divide between nationalism and unionism, and for the first time, unionists don't hold the majority of seats. They now have only 8 of the 18. The others are held by Sinn Féin, the Alliance Party, and the SDLP, there in dark green. What a night it was for them and their leader, Colm Eastwood. He took back Foyle, of course, from Sinn Féin, and his party also regained South Belfast. No wonder he's happy. But over in London, no one is smiling more this evening than that man, Boris Johnson. He's back in Downing Street with a large majority this time, 80 seats. It means he's looking forward to being Prime Minister for the next 5 years.
Our political editor, Mark Devonport, is with me, looking locally. What, for you, was the biggest shock of the night?
Well, I think the moment that obviously will stick in the mind of everyone was the moment when John Finucane beat Nigel Dodds there, because the human drama. Now, we knew it was on a knife edge. In the end, it was a relatively convincing victory for John Finucane. And I think it's one of those Portillo moments, because Nigel Dodds has been so senior in the DUP for so long, as their Westminster leader was associated with the confidence and supply deal that they've had for the last 2 years with the Conservatives. So it's a case, I suppose, of how the mighty have fallen, that they have now got to accommodate to the new reality of being just another party at Westminster and potentially having to look much more to Stormont.
Overall, Sinn Féin's vote share was down more than the DUP's. How do you read that?
Well, yeah, the John Finucane victory in North Belfast to some extent masked Sinn Féin's lack of success elsewhere, 6.7 percentage points down, whereas the DUP was only 5.5 percentage points down. I think there was definitely, if we put Brexit to one side, a protest vote going on here from people who are just sick, sore and tired of the Stormont standoff and the knock-on impact that's having on public services, and most crucially, of course, the health service. And I think that's where you have seen in a number of safe seats the majorities of both DUP and Sinn Féin MPs eroded. Maybe not enough in some instances for them to actually lose the seat, but certainly significantly so.
Celebrations, though, for Alliance and the SDLP.
Absolutely. Alliance, the big winners overall, because they saw an 8.8 percentage point rise in their vote, and they got the cherry on the top, which was actually getting an MP in the shape of Stephen Farry there coming through in North Down to basically hoover up a lot of Sylvia Herman's vote. The SDLP, they didn't have the same across-the-board growth, only 3 to 4 percentage points, but some really crushing victories. I think one aspect of this election was when people picked a winner, they really went for it. So we saw in Foyle and in South Belfast them getting about 57% of the vote, both Claire Hanna and Colm Eastwood, coming home really extremely convincingly. But the challenge, of course, to all those 3 pro-Remain MPs now is they go back to a Brexit parliament where Boris Johnson has a majority. So they wanted to stop Brexit, stop Boris. In fact, what they'll have to do, as I think Stephen Farry put it, is try to take some of the rough edges of Brexit.
OK, for now, Mark, thank you. Well, the most keenly contested seat was that of North Belfast, where the Sinn Féin mayor of the city, John Finucane, took on the DUP's deputy leader, Nigel Dodds. The election had been bitterly contested, and all along pundits said it was too close to call. In a constituency where unionist and nationalist areas sit side by side, the mood today was mixed. Here's our correspondent, Conor Macaulay.
It was the battle everyone had been watching.
Come forward, come forward.
And the winner was the focus of unrelenting media attention.
I think this is about something bigger.
The North Belfast seat predates the partition of Ireland. For 124 years, it had been held by a unionist, the last 18 of them by Nigel Dodds.
A better North Belfast and a better Northern Ireland. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
But changing demography, anti-Brexit sentiment, the SDLP and Greens deciding not to stand, had cleared the way for Sinn Féin to take the seat. The conventional wisdom was that a Christmas election would deter voters. Not in North Belfast, where the campaign had been bitterly fought.
What do you make of the result?
Well, I'm very happy. I'm delighted actually that I suppose what was before has changed now, and maybe that will lead the way to more change. I'm rather conflicted, I'm afraid, but I suppose I would not be a Nigel Dodds voter, and I suppose from that point of view I'm content enough.
John Finucane turned a 2,000-strong DUP majority into a 2,000-strong Sinn Féin one, a swing of 4,000 votes. Nationalists in affluent areas like this would have been key to that, and for all the talk that this seat was too close to call, what people on the streets of North Belfast are saying is that once the SDLP withdrew, John Finucane was odds on. The whole thing about the posters that were put up within loyalist areas, to what extent, if any, was that counterproductive, do you think?
I think whoever was behind those leaflets and behind those banners has not done the DUP any favours whatsoever. I think they actually galvanised voters to come out and vote for John Finucane.
I want to say I congratulate him on his victory.
It has been a difficult day for unionists in the constituency. The rainbow near Nigel Dodds' York Road office was one bright moment, but the mood was mostly sombre.
From what I've seen, there's been an awful lot of sadness along the Shore Road today about the DUP not getting through and Nigel Dodds not getting through because he's been part of this community for such a long time.
Don't think Finucane will be for unionist people.
And it leaves Northern Ireland unionism with a conundrum, says a former Presbyterian moderator with extensive links to North Belfast.
It's not just about circling the wagons or trying to get people to come to a polling booth or a polling station. It is about what does modern day Northern Ireland unionism look like inside a fractured so-called United Kingdom.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
A political heavyweight has left the Westminster stage, but it's unlikely to be the last we'll see of Nigel Dodds.
My goodness.
Conor Macaulay, BBC Newsline.
Let's focus now on some other results from across the 18 constituencies. Jim Shannon regained the Strangford constituency for the DUP with over 17,000 votes. He has a majority of over 7,000. In West Tyrone, Sinn Féin's Orla Begley got over 16,000 votes. She now has a majority of over 7,000, with the DUP in second place. In West Belfast, Sinn Féin's Paul Maskey regained the constituency with over 20,000 votes. He has a majority of over 14,000. In Mid-Ulster, Sinn Féin's Francie Malloy won over 20,000 votes. He now has a majority of over 9,000. And in East London Derry, the DUP's Gregory Campbell regained his seat with over 15,000 votes, a majority of over 9,000. And we look at more results later in this specially extended BBC Newsline. One of the more unexpected results was the Alliance Party's win in North Down. The seat had been a key target for the DUP. They came a close second to the outgoing MP Lady Herman last time around. But there was an alliance surge this time, which provided a comfortable win for Stephen Farry. The DUP also saw their majorities shrink in other seats. So what does that tell us about the state of unionism? Will Leach reports from North Down.
It had gone 2 a.m. before Northdown declared a result this morning.
I declare that Stephen Anthony Farry is returned to serve in Parliament for the Northdown constituency.
Stephen Farry, the Alliance deputy leader, confounded all expectations with a majority of almost 3,000. Until the votes were counted, the DUP must have been hoping for a smooth crossing in this seat, that Sylvia Herman's votes would simply transfer over to Alex Easton. But that hasn't happened, and indeed that ship has sailed, and it's with Stephen Farry and Alliance at the helm. Almost immediately, a former Ulster Unionist leader was ready to point the finger.
Brexit is unionism's biggest ever own goal, and the outcome may be the end of the United Kingdom.
What a difference between election night 2017 and 2019. Political fortunes can fall as well as rise. At the local Northdown newspaper, they knew the DUP had expected to win.
The DUP were really had Northdown as a very high priority. Once Sylvia Herman stepped down, they were putting all in to get Alex Easton into that seat. Where they had some issues were, of course, you had 17,000 voters, which was the Herman bloc, and the vast majority of them came in behind Stephen Farry. Also, Stephen Farry was the only Remain candidate in a Remain borough. And while it's a very, very strong showing from the DUP, I think a lot of that came down to Brexit. It was just Remain versus Leave. They were Leave, Northdown's Remain.
And one commentator who lives in the Northdown constituency says today's election results for unionism have been nothing short of a Friday the 13th nightmare.
Someone said to me that they expected there would be a day of reckoning for the Brexit project and the Brexit mess. I don't think they expected the DUP to pay the heavy price that they paid in the end. Now, the problem with all of that is that we're on the eve of the next Stormont negotiation. And how can the DUP, having whipped people up into a lather about the threat to the union, now go and speak to them about the compromises that are going to be needed to make a Stormont agreement? Yet at this time, the DUP probably needs Stormont more than anyone else, because if this negotiation fails, there won't be a Stormont at the centenary of Northern Ireland.
So how does political unionism react now? Boris Johnson doesn't need the DUP. A border in the Irish Sea. Stormont talks due next week.
Today, after these election results, it's really hard to argue anything other than that Brexit has been bad for unionism. There will be unionists who say that's because it wasn't properly implemented, but it's not looking good with Scotland and with this Irish sea border coming in, and with nationalist opinion here inflamed. But on top of that, the political centre ground, which is so opposed to Brexit, now openly thinking in terms of the possibility of a united Ireland.
Unionism is setting sail into new waters. Will Leach, BBC Newsline, Northdown.
The SDLP leader Colm Eastwood believes his party is experiencing a revival in its fortunes after it took seats in South Belfast and Foyle. For Colm Eastwood, it was a stunning personal success in winning back Foyle. The party previously held the seat for 34 years until losing it to Sinn Féin 2 years ago. Here's our Northwest reporter Kieran Turish.
Christmas has certainly come early for Colm Eastwood. The SDLP leader and his family were in festive mood in Guildhall Square this afternoon. Changed times from 2017 when the party lost their 3 MPs. He's convinced the SDLP is on its way back.
Well, it's absolutely the beginning of the revival of the SDLP. Just look at Claire Hanna's vote. With the vote here, we came very, very close in South Down. The vote is up in many constituencies across the north, so we have put in a real shift in this election. We told people we were coming back. We told people we were using the council elections as a staging post, and I think we've proved today that hard work pays off, and listening to people pays off as well.
And shoppers who expressed a view backed the new MP for Foyle.
I'm absolutely delighted about the result, and sense has prevailed at last, I'm glad to say.
Fully behind him, 100%. I voted for him yesterday. First time I've voted in years. I'm very proud of that.
Oh, I'm delighted for him. Delighted. Great to have the SDLP back.
I'm not terribly interested, if I'm being quite honest.
The party organised a special homecoming for the new MP, a chance to thank campaign teams, but also to reflect on an historic win. One observer believes he drew support from across the political spectrum.
Particularly, we've seen across community support for the SDLP, with Alliance voters defecting, several unionists, lots of unionists, hundreds of unionists voting for the SDLP, but even hardened Republicans showing their unhappiness that Sinn Féin has not delivered more for the city.
The SDLP was also celebrating Claire Hanna's success in South Belfast. She overturned a DUP majority of almost 2,000 votes to win by more than 15,000.
Any vote is always only lent. You have to earn it each time. I believe that we've done that. We wanted people to vote for something and not against something, and we listened to what people in South Belfast were concerned about, and that's what we've spent the last several months, indeed several years, talking about.
I think in this particular election, the fact that there was that informal pact that then formed in South Belfast around the lines of Remain really bolstered Claire Hanna's position and made it a lot easier for her to take the seat in the way that she did.
On the streets of South Belfast, there was a mixed view on the election of the new MP.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Very straight, honest person that will serve the community well, always has.
When I see her on telly, I think she's a great girl, that she talks a lot of sense.
We should never have been in the European Union to start with, and one of the problems today is that we don't have MPs who can make up their own minds and their own judgments, so that used to rubber stamping edicts that come from Europe.
I think we're very polarised because we weren't given a true choice. The nationalist people weren't given a true choice.
Colm Eastwood may have achieved the best ever result for the SDLP in Foyle, but he says it's not about personality politics. He says the people have spoken and they want politicians to get back to work. Kieran Turish, BBC Newsline, Derry.
And the SDLP leader Colm Eastwood joins me from our Foyle studio. You say it's not about personality politics, but what do you think secured you that big majority in Foyle?
Well, Donna, it's a lot of things. I think people are very frustrated with the lack of representation in Westminster. They want people to go there, to fight for them, to stand up for them and to speak up for them. But they also want Stormont to come back. I mean, we've heard this on every doorstep across this city. They want the health service crisis dealt with. They want more money in our schools. They want their children to be able to stay here and live here and get a job here. And they know that they need a government at Stormont to do that. I mean, nobody's in love with Stormont or Westminster, but they think our politicians are elected to do a particular job and they should do it. And I just believe that all of us in public life now need to listen to that. So look, we're...
Okay, you talk about representing people in the Commons. You allowed Sinn Féin to get John Finucane in North Belfast. Sinn Féin are still the biggest nationalist party. You've a long way to go to reach that power level.
Well, yeah, we do. Look, it's an interesting line of questioning, given we come from no MPs yesterday to having 2 MPs and very close to a third in South Down. This is a fantastic result for the SDLP. Claire Hanna's result was unbelievable, a 15,000 vote majority. I have over a 17,000 vote majority. We've done very, very well because people have backed us. We don't take any of that for granted. But the SDLP, this is a very good story and a very good day for the SDLP. I think even more importantly, it's a good day for the people that we represent.
So you're off to the Commons with Claire Hanna. Boris Johnson has a big majority now. Will you not be a voice in the wilderness on those benches?
Well, I don't think John Hume or Seamus Mallon or Eddie McGrady were ever voices in the wilderness. And if you look at things like policing reform, fair employment legislation, all of those things were delivered by John Hume and other SDLP MPs when there were big majorities to overcome. It is very, very doable. Look, we did our bit in Northern Ireland about rejecting Brexit and people in Scotland did their bit. It's unfortunate that people in England didn't do theirs, but you have to play the ball where it lies in politics, and we will be there fighting the fight and voting the right way and trying to protect ourselves from the worst possible. But you will be a small,
quiet voice
in
favour of remaining within the EU. Boris Johnson's voice is going to be an awful lot louder.
Well, that's very obvious that Boris Johnson has got a majority, but we will not be quiet, and people should understand that. And it's not Colm Eastwood or Claire Hanna speaking, it's the people of Derry and South Belfast and Northern Ireland roaring that they don't want to leave the European Union, that they want to be protected from the worst kind of Brexit. And remember, Boris Johnson has put a timeline of a year to do a trade deal with the European Union. That will not happen. So we're faced with a cliff edge in terms of no deal. We need to be there to protect ourselves from that.
OK, Colm Eastwood, thank you. And we'll be hearing from Sinn Féin in a moment. We did ask the DUP to come on the programme, but they didn't respond to our requests. With me in the studio now are the political commentators Alex Kane and Brian Rowan. We were actually looking at what I said in 2017 on this programme after the previous election. So much has changed, but let's focus on unionism first. And we heard many voices there, Alex and Brian, talking about crushing defeats. And where is unionism going? How do you see it?
Well, I think it's a good question where unionism is going, because the DUP took hits, I think, in 16 of the 17 constituencies. Their overall vote went down. It didn't go to the Ulster Unionist Party. Some of it drifted off to Alliance, small numbers. Some, I think, in South Belfast actually went to Clare Hanna. But the rest of it either didn't come out or just didn't want to engage with unionism of any sort. And that is a huge, big problem, because of the two key unionist parties in Northern Ireland seem incapable of galvanising. And what we were told all the way through this campaign, this was one of the most important elections for unionism. The existential question about the union itself was up for grabs, had to be discussed. And yet, another downfall for the overall unionist vote.
The problem, no unionist pacts overall.
Well, I think there's a pattern here. So if you look at the Assembly election of 2017, unionism lost its overall majority at Stormont. In May, in the European election, they lost the second unionist seat. Today, more Sinn Féin and SDLP MPs have been elected to Westminster. I think it has been a day of reckoning for the DUP. I think they've paid a price for their involvement in the Brexit project and in what many would see as the Brexit mess. They've tried to avoid the Brexit question in this election campaign. They now want to run on the Stormont ground, and they go into Monday's negotiations at Stormont with the open wounds of this battle. They've lost Nigel Dodds, they've lost Emma Pengilly. They thought they were going to win in Northdown, and Stephen Farry won that seat with a better vote than Sylvia Herman had a couple of years ago. So this is not a blip, Donna. It's a trend.
Sinn Féin may have some wounds as well.
Absolutely.
Do you think the two main parties were being punished by the electorate for not being in situ at the Assembly?
I think that is one reading of it, and I think they should probably take that on board, because if they go into talks on Monday and the outcome of those talks isn't successful and they're supposed to be going into an election, I think the message from this election for both Sinn Féin and the DUP, who took fairly substantial hits, is that do you really want to risk an election where the SDLP in two constituencies basically hammered their way to success, and where the Alliance Party in some extraordinary, Northdown, Strangford, 30% in Strangford, East Belfast, they almost took it. I would have thought if Sinn Féin and the DUP are concerned about their own future, they would be better making a deal now rather than running this to an election.
And the first time ever, we've more nationalist MPs in the Commons than unionist MPs.
And that's the point I was making in my first answer. I think the big two are still the big two, but they're not as big as they were. And I think John Finucane's win in North Belfast put a better face on the Sinn Féin performance, but below the headline of that big victory, they lost votes everywhere, hammered in Foyle. And I think both of them will come away from this election and have a good talk with themselves in the mirror. I think the question of abstentionism, the fact that there isn't an assembly, are things that they got in the ear on the doors. And what we're also seeing, Donna, as well as this kind of shrinking of the big two, when Alliance had that big performance in May, some people thought it was on borrowed votes. That performance has held up. And those are now votes that are owned rather than borrowed.
So are they the reluctant voters that didn't come out before are now voting for Alliance? Or has there been a switch between parties?
I think there's a bit of both there, which is interesting. But also I think there is something emerging which surprises me slightly, that there does appear to be. I was always sceptical of a breakthrough of something which could be defined as a genuine middle ground, but there is something happening. It's not simply in the building up of the Alliance Party, but it is in the fact that that Sinn Féin vote and that DUP vote, it didn't go anywhere else.
But the something that is happening is that Brexit has been the game changer. So our politics is no longer just about orange and green. It's about remain and leave. And I think old certainties are being challenged. And the point that Mike Nesbitt made in that interview last night, that Brexit could well prove to be the biggest unionist own goal. So we've got that big performance in Scotland. The second independence referendum is going to get louder. And here, the conversation about union versus unity is going to become louder as well.
Alex, Brian, thank you. The Conservative Party now holds a commanding 80-seat majority in the House of Commons. Boris Johnson will bring his deal back to Parliament next week. Our economics and business editor John Campbell is in Westminster for us. And Mr Johnson promised to get Brexit done, John, and looks like he will be able to do that now that he's got his majority.
Yeah, absolutely. When he brings that deal back next week, that will start the process, which will mean we will leave the EU by the 31st of January. And crucially, this time, Boris Johnson will not have to rely on the votes of the DUP. So he can credibly say he's got Brexit done. Though it's not quite as simple as that, because we will be into the next phase of Brexit. We'll have this year-long transition standstill period in which Mr Johnson will have to both negotiate a trade deal and then try to work out exactly how the Irish Sea border is going to work. But speaking this afternoon, the Prime Minister said he did not want the next 5 years to be solely about Brexit.
If you ask yourselves, what is this new government going to do? What is he going to do with his extraordinary majority? I will tell you that is what we are going to do. We are going to unite and level up. Unite and level up, bringing together the whole of this incredible United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, together, taking us forward, unleashing the potential of the whole country, delivering opportunity across the entire nation.
How clear are we what all of this will mean for Northern Ireland?
Well, we're clear that the deal as it currently stands will mean an Irish Sea border. There will have to be checks on some goods coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. That's because as a result of Mr Johnson's deal, Northern Ireland would stay in the EU single market for goods, the rest of the UK would not. Now, the only way you could avoid that scenario unfolding is if Mr Johnson decides to use his majority to pursue a much softer form of Brexit. Now, as it stands, there is no real sign of that happening, and in fact what the EU are saying, and the EU leaders have been meeting today, is tell us what you ultimately want your relationship with the EU to be like. Then we can actually get down to business, we can talk Turkey, we can try and focus on that trade deal, and those negotiations will begin probably in March.
Talking Turkey in the run-up to Christmas for now. John Campbell, thank you. Next, more of our constituency results for you. In Belfast East, the DUP's Gavin Robinson regained his seat with more than 20,000 votes. He now has a majority of just over 1,800. In North Antrim, the DUP's Ian Paisley also regained his seat with over 20,000 votes. He has a majority of over 12,000. The DUP's Sammy Wilson also kept his seat in East Antrim. He now has a majority of over 6,000 votes. Another victory for the DUP in South Antrim, where Paul Girvan was re-elected. He now has a majority of just over 2,500 votes. And in South Down, the Sinn Féin incumbent Chris Hazard was re-elected with just over 16,000 votes. He has a reduced majority of 1,620 votes. Joining me from West Belfast is Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey. How disappointed is your party with its overall performance in this election?
Well, I think with all due respect, it's a bit of a ridiculous question to ask the party who's just secured 7 MP seats returned yesterday.
Your vote share is down, Mr Maskey.
Well, the vote share may have gone down some constituencies, and there are explanations for that. And of course, we will reflect very well on all of that. But just remember, we have returned 7 MPs in a very, very significant election campaign. It's a game-changing election, I have no doubt about that. And we have helped to change the narrative now insofar as we were very clearly involved in trying to make sure that we fought the election on a positive basis, tried to make sure that we got all of the progressive forces to unite together to maximise the number of pro-Remain candidates elected. That is something that we have very successfully achieved, and we're very proud to be a part of that. So we will look at the election returns in every constituency. Some of the constituencies where we have dropped the vote, as you say, those constituencies are considered by the constituents to be absolutely safe, guaranteed seats. We don't accept that, of course, and we keep telling people there is no safe seats or no guaranteed seats. You have to fight for every single vote.
You talk about a game-changing election. It certainly was that in Foyle, and Colm Eastwood has a 17,000 majority. What went wrong with Alicia McCallion's campaign?
And Alicia McCallion very gracefully congratulated Colm Eastwood. And we also secured a very, very significant victory in North Belfast, where John Finucane was elected. We have ousted in North Belfast the Chief Brexit architect, if you like, who has been working with the Tory government for the last number of years, who has very badly represented North Belfast and very often in a very sectarian manner. So that was a very significant victory and perhaps the biggest victory of this election campaign. So I think you have a presumption from some of your questions which actually seem to be trying to put the Sinn Féin vote down.
Okay,
we have
so
very successfully come through that election and have now 7 MPs to show for that.
Okay, Alex Maskey, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time on BBC Newsline this evening with the Alliance Party's new MP, Stephen Farry, the new MP for North Down, is with me. Congratulations.
Thank you, Donna.
Why did you secure that vote?
Well, I think I was probably the most fitting successor to Sylvia Herman in the constituency. People were looking for someone who was inclusive, progressive and pro-European, and I fitted the bill in that regard. It was a very clear choice between myself and Alex Easton. I was representing that Remain desire, and North Down was one of those constituencies in Northern Ireland that voted Remain in 2016, and the DUP were offering the hard Brexit.
So is your success peculiar to only certain areas of Northern Ireland, that you're not really transferable elsewhere?
Well, I think that was the crucial difference that took us to the even greater heights in North Down, where we were able to secure the seat. But indeed, across Northern Ireland as a whole, we were performing extremely well. The Alliance surge has continued. People were writing it off as a flash in the pan in the locals and the Europeans, but it's still there, and indeed it's been consolidated. And we have seen some spectacular results right across the board, where we have seen major leaps in our level of support.
Are you still seen as, by some, as a unionist party with a small u?
Well, people like to label us, but we see ourselves very much as a cross-community party. There are people in the party who are supporters of the union, people who want to see a united Ireland, and people who want to see Northern Ireland working as a society. The thing that unites everyone in the party, regardless, is bringing Northern Ireland together, promoting integration, reconciliation. We're not defined by the border. We are a very unique party in that regard, and our vision and values are very important to us.
Stephen Farry, thank you for joining us in the studio on BBC Newsline. Well, our programme has been dominated by election results and MPs and constituencies, but many people will want to know what the weather is going to be like this weekend, and Barra Best joins me in the studio. Barra.
Thanks, Donna. My favourite phrase, keep the big coat handy this weekend. It's going to be chilly. We have snow and sleet in the forecast, mainly for the high ground. This evening and tonight, quite chilly. We'll see scattered showers coming in from the west, bringing a dusting of sleet and snow, maybe some ice around first thing tomorrow as well, and some frost. And this weekend is going to be very chilly, cold days, chilly nights, and over the tops of the mountains we are likely to see some sleet and snow. And as we make our way into next week, we continue to see some low pressure staying with us. It will remain unsettled at times and certainly feeling colder right through until next week, with temperatures at best around 5 or 6 degrees.
And that was BBC Newsline. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.